Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first ever virtual Governors Conference on Tourism. This is not the format that we wanted. We all know the value of an in-person meeting, especially in our industry, but we know that you agree with us that this was the format we needed to do this year. With the health crisis, we decided to go live today, and you are seeing everything as it happens. So while we have practiced and we've prepared, we all know from working at home the last few months that technology is not always our friend. If you are experiencing any issues, please go down to the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and let us know so we can help you as quickly as possible. And with that, now please join me for a very special conference welcome. And how's that for kicking off with technological issues? We will fix that issue because we do want to hear a welcome from the governor, but we're going to go on for just a minute and then we'll get back to the governor's video. I want to thank all of you for another great year of collaboration, amazing support, and right now much needed and appreciated camaraderie. These are tough times for all of us, but we have been through tough times before. Our industry is incredibly resilient, and together we will get through this challenge. I want to take a moment and thank our key conference spots, Visit Tucson, Visit Phoenix, and Off Madison Ave. With all the conference changes that took place this year, we are so grateful for your flexibility. We have a few other sponsors that include Arizona State Parks, Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation, Phoenix Convention Center, Cactus League Baseball Association, Arizona Highways Magazine, Local IQ, Meredith Corporation, and Sunrise Park Resort. Thank you all. We have a lot to share today. First, you're going to hear from Colleen Floyd, Director of Research, who's going to give you a look into our data, both record-breaking 2019 information, as well as some of the data we've been seeing since the pandemic. I will follow with AOT's destination marketing efforts and plans for this coming fiscal year. And then you're going to hear from Leave No Trace on the launch of our new partnership. And finally, you're going to be one of the first to see our Arizona Tourism Strategic Recovery Plan, and I can't wait for you to see it. After the presentations, please stay with us because we will have Q&A that you can send any of your questions to any one of our panelists, and we'll be happy to answer them. You'll use that same Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. We'll get to as many questions as possible. And now, please welcome Colleen Floyd.
All right, thank you, Debbie. So we are in a very different place this year than we were last year when I gave the last update. So this update will be different as well. So like Debbie said, I'll be going over the highlights of our 2019 data. And again, we had an amazing record-breaking year, and I'm so proud of this state in our industry. But rather than dive deep into it like I normally do, I'm going to more use it as a lens for how to examine how this pandemic is going to and is affecting our industry, as well as how we can approach strategies to get through it and come out even stronger. So we'll be feeling the effects very differently across the state depending on where you are. And I realize that a statewide overview isn't always going to get into the details of how things look in your area. But I'll do my best to create an overview that will demonstrate just how important tourism is to Arizona. We know this, and how to move forward from here. So as Debbie said, we had a record-breaking year for visitation. We welcomed 46.8 million overnight visitors to Arizona in 2019. That splits out into 40.6 million domestic overnight visitors and 6.1 million international visitors. And that number increased for both domestic and international. So here we have the trend for the last 10 years. And I just want to point out that we had 10 years of amazing growth. And even though it's so discouraging that visitation has fallen off so much, what this tells me is that more and more people are really valuing travel. And it's not just that Arizona has been competitive, which we absolutely have been. It's that it's a value for more people. People want to travel, and I don't think that's going to go away. Now, looking forward, we've been watching several studies to try to wrap our arms around who's going to be the first to travel, what they're going to look like, where they're going to come from. You may recognize this study. This is run by Longwoods International and Miles Partnership. And this is one of a couple studies we're looking at, but there are some themes that run through each of these that I think will guide us in the next few months or even year. First, that there's a lot of hesitation around traveling. Some people, a fairly large number of people, have no immediate plans to travel. Those that do are probably planning on traveling by car, and those first trips, the priority is going to be to visit friends and family. Well, thankfully, we're very well set up for that in Arizona. 38% of our trips already are to visit friends and family. And then the next highest priority tends to be other travel by car within 200 miles, a little longer, within the US. And we're well set up for that too. Our visitors are very used to driving themselves. 71% drive themselves, either in their own car, in a rental car, or an RV. And we have a little bit of a competitive edge compared to the national average when it comes to those touring road trips, and also for outdoor trips. And we've seen through article and study after study that those are becoming more of a choice for visitors in this age of social distancing. We're also seeing this very clearly in our state parks visitation. So this chart excludes the historic parks, which had been closed for a little bit. But the nature parks remained open throughout the shutdown. And you can see that there was a little bit of there were some drops in visitation in March and April, but pandemic or no, May was a record-breaking year for state parks visitation. And this pattern is even more prominent when you look at state parks with a waterway or a lake. So those parks are about to hit their peak season. So this is also when it's going to be really important to pay attention to overcrowding, and that we're taking very good care of these spaces that have become even more popular than they were before. So leisure travel is likely to be the one to recover first, and we will have to work very hard to rebuild business travel. Because business travel, they tend to spend more per person, but it does make up a smaller section of our visitors. We also keep hearing that people are going to stick close to home. And so this is going to be a little bit of an area of struggle with us, because 3/4 of our visitors are non-residents, non-Arizona residents. So we really are going to have to rely on Arizona residents traveling within their state. The last few years, resident travel has been growing at a pretty good clip, but in 2019, it only grew about 1.5%. So it was sort of like for a minute there, they forgot how great it was to explore their own backyard. And I'm thinking this year is going to be an excellent reminder of why Arizona is such a great place to explore. So even though we have some great foundations for recovery, there's absolutely no denying that this is an incredibly difficult time. The 2020 data is starting to come in, and we're getting hints of how things are going in this pandemic. So first we have overnight domestic visitation by quarter, and now we have Q1. So this doesn't look like a huge drop, but that represents more than 1 million visitors that didn't come this year that came last year. And if you think about this quarter, there's not a lot of post-pandemic time represented here. This is only 2 weeks out of a 3-month period after things really started to shut down. So just shaving off those 2 weeks made visitation for the whole quarter drop 11%. And it does seem that leisure was not quite as dramatically impacted as business. Leisure dropped about 10%, while business dropped almost 18%. So what's discouraging and encouraging at the same time is that business had really begun to pick up some momentum, and growing as much as 5% in some quarters. So if you're a DMO marketer, what you were doing was working. That segment was performing really well. So we know that both segments in a holistic recovery plan will be addressed. And again, not a surprise, resident travel was not quite as impacted as non-resident travel into into Arizona. So again, we're really going to have to leverage that in-state visitor for a little while, and then eventually our regional drive markets. So that's visitation, and probably even more important than the number of visitors we welcome is the economic benefits that they bring. And again, this was another record-breaking year in 2019. It was visitors spent $25.6 billion in our economy. And that was up a very strong 4.7%. And that visitor spending supported 194,000 Arizona jobs, and those jobs earned $7.7 billion in earnings. Now, what can we learn from last year's data that will help guide us into the coming months and years? And I think taking an honest look at how our industry is structured, where we will struggle and where we may have some advantages is going to be the way to go. Clearly here in this chart, so this chart is spend by accommodation type. And what that means is this is, if someone stayed in a hotel, this is how much they spent. If they were a day traveler, this is how much they as a group spent. So very clear that hotel, motel, and short-term vacation rental guests are the most impactful visitors because they have that lodging spending. And we will struggle here for a while. What is encouraging is that we've seen some really good momentum growing among spending by day travelers as well as private homestays, which are often people staying with friends and family. So as we move forward, how do we convert those day travelers to overnight guests? And how do we encourage people whose friends and family are coming to visit them to spend more money, go to safe attractions, that kind of thing? Another encouraging point, there's evidence that even though 38% of our visitors are coming to visit friends and family, they're not all staying with friends and family in their homes. Only 18% did. So they're making choices to stay in resorts and hotels. And so that's really encouraging too. It's also pretty clear that visitors have been spending over the years more and more in accommodations and food service. And we all know how very dramatically these segments have been impacted by the pandemic. This is also where most of the tourism jobs are. Food, accommodations and food service accounts for more than half of the jobs supported by visitor spending. Almost 100,000 people were employed in just these two sectors in 2019. Which is why when Trevor talks about our recovery plan, one of the things that we talked about at length is stabilizing accommodations and food service. Now, without visitors traveling to Arizona, there's no money to support these jobs. And we really couldn't afford to wait until next year to give this update to understand what the impact was. So we went to Dean Running Associates, our economic impact vendor, and asked them to create monthly estimates with the data they have available. Some of you may have seen monthly and even weekly estimates for Arizona come through the U.S. Travel Association done by Tourism Economics. Those are great as well. We really wanted to make sure that our monthly state estimates matched what we put out every year. So this is why these estimates are from Dean Running Associates. And you can see we were moving along at a pretty good pace in January and February. February saw some great spending growth before things really just fell off a cliff in March and April. So we do see a little bit of confidence returning, a little bit more spending in May, a little bit more in June, but still way below normal. So this drop in spending represents a $7 billion net loss in visitor spending through June. That's massive, especially considering the entire economic impact last year was $25 billion. Now, that then translates into the amount of jobs that travel can support. So employment's a little bit tricky for me to explain, so bear with me for a second. This is the number of jobs that visitor spending would have supported, not necessarily the number of jobs that actually existed. So back in March of 2019, travel spending in Arizona would have supported about 198,000 jobs in that month. And this year in March, it only supported 102,000. And then in April, it could only support 27,000. And so we're seeing some growth back, but that is a huge, huge number of people or jobs that are no longer supported by visitor spending and will need to be supported in other ways. So for example, locals getting takeout or dining in the restaurants more often, and probably more substantially through the Paycheck Protection Program and other federal assistance. Also, another major impact is the estimated state tax revenue loss from all this travel spending that did not occur. We don't have this modeled out to the local and county level yet, but we can probably assume that there are going to be some very similar patterns being followed. So we can see here in March of 2019, the state general fund would have collected about $139 million from travel spending, but that number dropped to 41 million and then 10 million in April. Another way to look at this is the cumulative effect of the pandemic on state tax revenue. So by June of the last year, we'd almost, our industry had almost contributed very close to $600 million to the state general fund. And this year it's closer to 300. So we're looking at a $284 million net loss to general fund. We also have been looking at gross sales data that's reported by the Arizona Department of Revenue on a couple key sectors. So lodging, restaurant, bar, retail, and those kind of perform differently depending on which sector they're in. But for lodging, everything shut down at a really tough time for the state, where March is high season. That's when we have our highest collections of lodging taxes. Lodging sales were down 54% in March, 79% in April, and then 59% in May. But again, we're starting to see a little bit of more confidence. Lodging data also looks pretty different regionally. So now I'm going to go through, we'll take a quick look at room demand across the counties. So I chose to look at demand this time instead of occupancy or RevPAR, because when hotels close, that can impact the occupancy number. So I figured I would look at just straight up room nights sold and the percent change based on that same month in the previous year. So here we can see in the southern Arizona, large drops in April, starting to get a little bit better in June, but still far, far below normal. And that pattern continued for Maricopa and Pinal County in the central region. The north central region starts to come back a little bit, especially in Gila County. Yavapai County had an amazing February, but there's still quite a bit of drop off. All right, we're coming into high season for the northern region too. So this is a really unfortunate time to have such major drops in room demand in Coconino County and some of the other counties. And then West Coast region, these are the counties that have been performing the best, really. So La Paz County has actually managed to improve upon their 2019 performance for May and June. And Mojave County, for their June, is very close to what they had achieved last year. Going back to tax data for a minute, one of the things that has been floating around is the idea that maybe short-term vacation rentals, online lodging, so like Airbnb, is going to be the accommodation of choice in this era of social distancing. And at first, I hadn't really seen evidence of that. We can see here in earlier months that online lodging made up, between 10, peaking at 14 of tax collections in January, and then a few months. But then in May, that number jumped up to 15% of lodging tax collections. So 1 month doesn't make a trend. We'll keep watching this, but it will be interesting. A couple of things that that will probably soften the blow to the state general fund in terms of tourism revenue is the fact that we are collecting lodging taxes from those short-term vacation rentals, and also the fact that we're collecting TPT on online purchases. All right, so restaurant and bar sales are obviously reliant on locals as well as visitors, but you can see that there was starting to be a little bit of hesitance to dine out in February, and then some fairly large drops in the following months. And retail looks okay from a tax perspective. There was even an increase in May. But if this data contains habits much like mine, there's got to be a lot of online retail here. So this is a reminder that we really need to support local businesses. All right, so we've looked back at how things have gone in recent months, and we also want to keep close track of leading indicators, and traveler sentiment is one of the best ones. So we want to know if travelers feel comfortable traveling, if they plan to travel, when, and what those trips will look like. So this is another study that we've subscribed to from destination analysts, and this shows that more than half of people surveyed said they at least need some time before they're ready to travel. That's a lot of people that are still uncomfortable with travel. The western part of the country, where most of our regional visitors are likely to come from, are a little bit more ready to travel than other parts of the country, but not by much. So there's a lot of hesitation. Now, this is from a study that we fielded earlier, an Arizona resident sentiment before the pandemic hit, and we weren't able to collect as much data as we would have liked because everyone had other things on their minds, naturally. But I did want to point out the support in Arizona for tourism. So a lot of people really do support the idea of tourism playing a major economic role or even a vital role. And plenty of people who think additional tourism would be desirable. And going back to the destination analyst study, we can see with Arizona residents in particular, there's still a lot of concern about contracting the virus. More than, I think it's roughly 70% of Arizona residents have at least some concern about contracting the virus, and 25% are very or extremely concerned. So this is how people are feeling, and this is the environment that we will need to understand to market effectively. So we need to ask ourselves, how are we going to calm those fears? How are we going to create safe spaces for visitors to enjoy themselves, to get a little bit back to normal, but get back traveling again? All right, so I know this did not go over all the details for counties, but we have so much more data, and we're always happy to share. So I just wanted to point out really quickly where you can find this. So on our website, tourism.az.gov, you click on research and resources, you'll go to economic impact. And then farther down, this is going to be the PDF of the 2019 report. The legislative district one will be up pretty shortly. And if you prefer a more interactive version, you can go to the Arizona Travel Impacts Interactive Dashboard. But most importantly, I also want to encourage you to please reach out to us. We have lots more information. We're really here for you, here to help. And we are happy to answer any questions we can. All right, and with that, I will turn it back over to Debbie.
Thank you so much, Colleen. We really appreciate it. So what I want to remind everybody, just in case I forgot to tell you in the beginning, is that all these programs, our presentations today, our breakouts tomorrow, everything is going to be recorded and it will be made available next week. We'll try to post the links in Tourism Tuesday, but it will all be posted on tourism.az.gov, as will all the slides from today as well. So please make sure you check tourism.az.gov. It also has all of our research, as Colleen just covered. With that, I'm to jump into information about our fiscal year 20 program. As you all know, our marketing program was impacted, as was everyone else's. But even though we lost the momentum, there was still some great work done, and I want to just share a few accomplishments, if I could. Last fall, we implemented the Unreal multi-channel advertising campaign. This campaign was in our national markets and our target cities of Chicago, Dallas, Minneapolis, New York, and San Francisco. The campaign was expanded with an integrated marketing partnership with Outside Magazine. And this content, as you can see here, featured Arizona influencers who shared stories about our tribal and rural communities. Travel and Leisure was another fantastic partner for us last year. And this program of work featured locations such as Strawberry and Pine, as well as experiences like under canvas glamping at the Grand Canyon and some of our luxurious spas and resorts in Scottsdale and Phoenix. The Unreal campaign was also supported by a second-year partnership with Saks Fifth Avenue in the New York market. We highlighted 5 luxury resorts in the Fifth Avenue New York store windows, and we aligned these efforts with New York Fashion Week, which brought in over 40 million impressions. So unfortunately, we were only 3 weeks away when the pandemic hit and the completion of our marketing campaigns, but our programs did still achieve some really fantastic results. You can see here the results of our ad effectiveness survey. My favorite part of this is the tax revenue that we earned, $30 for every $1 invested in tourism marketing. Our Rural Marketing Cooperative Program also saw some great results. We had 34 partners and $1 million in matching funds from AOT. We also provided some new opportunities with Local First Arizona, some research programs that provided mobile location data, and office hours with our ad agency, OMA. You can see here the great results and increases. Beyond our advertising efforts, we collaborated with Arizona's wine industry to create our first ever statewide wine brochure. We also secured ArizonaWines.com to provide cohesive support of our Arizona's 3 wine regions. This brochure, Savoring Arizona, focused on the wine trails and the tasting rooms in these 3 regions, and we used it at all of our trade and consumer events, as well as made them available at all our Arizona Visitor Information Centers. We also completed for the wine industry a specific wine-focused episode with Arizona Highways TV that aired this previous spring. Our media relations team, 40 travel writers, editors, and photojournalists, providing some unique story ideas on Arizona. We focused on the international markets of Australia, Canada, China, Mexico, Germany, France, and the UK, and helped produce over 1,000 articles that promoted Arizona. With our travel trade activities, we educated more than 9,000 people using destination trainings and sales appointments. New virtual trainings have helped us to stay active in these critical international markets. We've ensured that our global travel trade industry is still well educated on our Arizona product. We generated nearly 800 statewide articles in our local media that talked about the importance of tourism on Arizona's economy. And in support of our communities, we held 66 presentations across the state talking about tourism. We also continued to build our network of Arizona Visitor Information Centers. We partnered with Arizona State Parks to designate each of their visitor centers as official AVICs, adding 21 visitor centers for a total of 49 AVICs available to visitors. And even though our marketing program was cut short, we're really proud of these accomplishments, and we know that they provide us the opportunity to move forward with strength and commitment toward recovery for all of us. And now, I want to share a little bit about what we've done since the pandemic. Our industry, as you all know, continues to be one of the hardest hit with the economic fallout. The sudden stop of travel and tourism activity created massive losses in revenue and led to a surge in layoffs and furloughs in the industry. In March, Governor Ducey called upon AOT and the Commerce Authority to help lead through this economic recovery period. One of the first things we did was create the Arizona Hospitality Workforce Connection. We did this in collaboration with the Office of Economic Opportunity. And this website connects displaced hospitality workers with the industries like healthcare and grocery stores that are so desperately needing people right now. The employers can post no-cost listings, and then job seekers can search kind of familiar hospitality titles to them and be connected with jobs that might work for their skills. The website, as you can see, has seen over 31,000 unique page views, and we've placed over hundreds of people in the jobs. In late May, we launched Rediscover Arizona. This campaign highlights the amazing Arizona imagery with inspiring slogans: rediscover stargazing, rediscover wide open spaces, rediscover staycations. We have the ability to turn this program on and off at a moment's notice, depending on consumer sentiment and health. And I don't think it will surprise any of you that right now we are currently turned off with this program. Now, I'm going to go a little bit more into detail on Rediscover in a minute, but before we talk about this, we need to talk about AOT's budget. So our budget is currently projected to have an overall funding allocation of $4 million less than what we had last year. Unfortunately, with reduced funding from Prop 302, the Maricopa County Stadium Tax, and Prop 202, the tribal gaming revenue, this obviously impacts tourism. The impact of closed facilities, fewer visitors, and means a significant loss in revenue for many of us. While this will impact our marketing and operations for fiscal year 21, we are looking at other options such as CARES Act funding, EDA grant support, and other opportunities to help tourism, not only AOT, but our partners throughout the state. We're not going anywhere. The governor and our elected officials understand the value of tourism, as you'll see when we can get the governor's video to work, and they understand the impact that we make on the economy and tax revenue. So please understand, I don't want anybody to panic when they hear that number. We're working with it, and one of the things that we're doing, recognizing we can't do everything we want, we're creating very strategic programs that are going to connect all of us together and really provide the greatest impact for the whole state. So let's talk a little bit about what we have planned. Flexibility is going to be key this year. We're all in this situation together, we know that, but none of us knows what's going to happen next. So the implementation of our plans will, as always, be research-based, but we're using a couple new criteria indicators that we haven't been top of mind before, and that's consumer sentiment and public health. Like all of you, we believe very strongly that the health of our employees, our residents, and our visitors is paramount to everything else. With that in mind, Rediscover Arizona will be our primary advertising campaign for fiscal year 21. As I mentioned earlier, phase 1 was launched over Memorial Day, and it was geo-fenced to reach Arizonans only. And while it's on pause right now, we are ready to reactivate the moment the time is right. After that, when data shows us that consumers are a little more comfortable traveling and our residents have those same feelings, we're going to expand that to reach our potential drive markets, and then shortly thereafter into target cities and eventually a full domestic campaign. Consumers can visit rediscoveraz.com for new ideas, activities, itineraries, and learn how to enjoy Arizona safely this year. So under our new budget parameters, the travel, trade, and media relations efforts are going to look a little bit different this year as well. International marketing will be limited without an active call to action right now until that time is right. But we are going to keep the awareness of Arizona on the minds of international travelers by building new and unique itineraries, offering those great virtual destination trainings, and working with writers on some inspirational travel stories. We are also launching 2 major initiatives that will impact our operations and support our communities, and I am really excited about both of these efforts. The first is a partnership with the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics. This partnership was planned for a little further into fiscal year 21, but with so many new visitors in our outdoor spaces due to the pandemic, we focused on the need to bring this program on earlier to get it rolled out and implemented across all of our efforts. It will also be available to all our communities and partners as well. The second is our Arizona Tourism Strategic Recovery Plan. We know that this year, partnership and collaboration is going to be critical for all of us to be successful and lead through this recovery process. This exercise that we've gone through the past few months has really created some great options, and we're working to flex our team's time in order to provide the best results, and we really are excited to share it with you. I'm excited to have Trevor next. But first, of our 2 speakers, we are going to introduce Arizona becomes the 2nd state in the U.S. to create a statewide partnership with Leave No Trace. The first was the organization's home state of Colorado. The goal is to promote sustainable tourism practices across Arizona's unique destinations and spectacular landscapes. We're learning from Leave No Trace research that people form lasting connections with nature when they understand how to take care of it. This partnership is going to help us build programs that ensure that visitors and residents are equipped with the knowledge to protect all of Arizona's natural wonders while enjoying our destinations. Please welcome Dana Watts, Executive Director of the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics.
Hello, Debbie, and hello, everyone. I am delighted to be here. I'm just going to share my screen quickly and bring up the presentation. Excellent. Again, I'm thrilled to be here under these circumstances. I wish we could all be in the same room, but this truly is the next best thing. And I am, again, delighted to share more information about this new partnership. Arizona is a state of unparalleled natural beauty. It's a big reason why people live in Arizona, and it's a big reason why many so want to visit the state. Getting outside, especially in these times, renews our spirit, connects us with nature, amazing beauty, and some of the many natural wonders of the outdoors. And Arizona has plenty of natural wonders with 34 state parks, 18 national monuments, 3 national parks, and thousands of acres of national forest. Arizona has endless opportunity for outdoor adventure. This new partnership with Leave No Trace and the Arizona Office of Tourism is designed to protect those outdoor spaces and those outdoor experiences. It's for residents and it's for visitors alike. What is Leave No Trace and what do we do? We are a nonprofit organization and we are on a mission to equip, empower, and inspire every person who ventures outside with a framework to care for and protect nature. Leave No Trace is a different type of conservation movement and effort because it's really all about people and the significant difference people can make in the care and protection of outdoor spaces. So why is it important? And Debbie had talked about, and Colleen a little bit, how many people are getting out today? 13 billion trips to the outdoors across the US alone. And what we know is that 9 out of 10 people are ill-equipped, or they don't have the best information that allows them, empowers them to make good decisions to protect the outdoor world. That's what this partnership is all about. Damage is happening to nature, but it is preventable and one of our goals by joining forces together. Leave No Trace is effective and successful because it's based in science. Together, we will launch other and significant projects to really look at the messaging. And again, based in the foundation of science, it will make what we do most effective. The principles and information that we currently use have been studied, and in the last 5 to 10 years, we've launched a number of different types of study that are human dimension types research, really looking at people's behavior. What we found is that when people are exposed to Leave No Trace, 85% of them tend to change their behavior in the positive direction as a result. But one of the things that we know is it needs repeat exposure to have the greatest impact. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means for this program and for this partnership. These are the 7 principles of Leave No Trace. These are the core tenets that make up the program and will form the foundation of what we do together. And this is, again, the foundation, but these principles will then be tailored to be very specific to Arizona's different populations, different cultures, different ecosystems. So they will be meaningful and relevant, again, for visitors and for residents. What kind of behaviors are we really trying to influence? Again, this touches on the different types of impacts that we're seeing in the outdoors. What we know is that Leave No Trace is not a policing body, it's really an education effort. And so illegal actions are not necessarily the issues that we're going to address. We are looking at the careless actions, the unskilled actions, and the uninformed actions. And that's where we will have the most influence with our work. One thing to point out is that Leave No Trace has, the roots are in the backcountry and wilderness areas, but over the last 10 to 15 years, we've moved the program and it's evolved to really reach people in what we call front country environments, even urban corridors. So it's really a program for anyone who goes outside today. And the thing that we stress the most is anyone can practice Leave No Trace, from the family picnicking in a city park to that outdoor adventurer who's going backpacking for multiple days. It's a program for everyone and it's effective because of that. Effective communication is what it's all about. And these are just the core tenets that we look at to make sure that we are effectively reaching people. Inclusiveness, representation. We want to hear from many different voices to make sure that we get it right. We're clear, we're concise, easy user friendly. So it's not complicated, especially for those first time users or travelers who are experiencing things for the first time. Everyday values play a role, relevance to people's lives, and really explaining the why we're asking people to do a certain thing. And I'll get a little bit more into that later in the show. But one of the things that I wanted to point out is under the current COVID-19, this pandemic that we're all living in, this is just an example of a current situation, very unexpected, arguably very unusual, where we really looked at what's happening right now and how can we message to people in a way that is relevant and meaningful, allows them to get outside and in a safe way. And we touched on this a little bit earlier. So people feel comfortable and they feel safe still traveling and touring and getting outside under the current circumstances. How does Leave No Trace reach people? Many, many different ways. These are all of the different user groups that we work with and outlets that we use to get our message out. Leave No Trace does have a partnership structure, and core to our structure are the federal, state, and local government agencies. So the land managers who are out there providing information to people, interacting one-on-one with people, that's a core partner group. Corporate partners and non-government organizations and other non-profits also play a role. Tourism has been in some ways the missing link, and it's why this partnership is so important. Tourism, outdoor industry, public land management come together, and Leave No Trace is at the center, bringing this critical information to these different partner groups and then getting it out to the public, tourists, visitors, and residents. We've mapped out 5 steps of a recreational experience, and this is really any kind of experience trip planning. And there are five parts of this model, 5 steps, if you will. Most people learn about Leave No Trace on site. So they're already at step 3. They're in the experience themselves. And what we found is while that's good, the best place to reach people is in that first stage, the anticipation stage. And it again illustrates why this type of partnership, the tourism partnership, is so critical, because we have the opportunity together to reach people before they get to their final destination. In that trip planning for the outing stage, everybody's excited, everybody's getting ready. How can we prepare them for the trip that they're taking and help them minimize their impacts when they get on site? I talked a little bit about the importance of being prepared, and this slide is really about the why. How can we express why we're asking people to do certain things and the importance? Our research has shown that we can tell people to do certain things. For instance, learn about the area you plan to visit. Why is that important? And what difference does it make to people? Well, it's important because if people don't come prepared and they don't have the right equipment or clothing, or even down to sunscreen, rain protection, all these things that help make for a better experience, that does impact their experience mostly in a negative way. So if we can prepare people in advance and tell them why, it makes for a much more successful experience overall, and people tend to have a better connection to the land and to their overall experience itself. Strategies for tourism, and we're just starting to work on these together with the Arizona Office of Tourism, but assessing and evaluating the resident visitors. What do residents really want to see? This is that residents play a significant role in this partnership. They're the people who are living in the state. They also are people who are touring around the state. but they have an ownership of some of these areas. So how can we really tap into how they feel and what their needs and desires are? We're going to look at professional development for tourism staff. We've already launched some high-level training. That's going to be important also for partners. We will be designing very specific messaging, principles, and a toolkit, and I'll talk a little bit later on for different tourism partners, and along with that, messaging campaigns. These are all things that are in the works as we bring this partnership together. As Debbie mentioned, we did launch this partnership with Colorado, and it has, it's about 2 years in the making for actual work together. We have some tremendous outcomes for the state of Colorado, and I think the biggest outcome is that we're really changing the culture, and it's what residents want to see, and we know that from data collected. They want to build more of a sustainable tourism focus and partnership, and it has allowed us to do that. We've reached millions of people and had impressions through media. We've also brought on a number, I don't know the exact number, but I am going to supply that at some point. It's hundreds, not necessarily hundreds, but diverse partners who are helping get the message out. And we continue to expand the different partnership opportunities. This example is these are the Care for Colorado principles, and you can just see how we have tailored the principles themselves to be very Colorado specific, and it's allowed other partners within the Colorado Coalition is what we're calling it right now, to also tailor this brochure to meet their needs. So opportunities to interact with visitors. This again talks about that 5 steps in the recreation, that model. And the difference with tourism is really the opportunity to reach people at those early stages. So we have registration, and this just takes us, kind of plots us through a hotel and lodging type situation. So if somebody makes a reservation at a certain hotel, and then we have the opportunity to send them follow-up email that explains this is the check-in situation, the confirmation, and hey, by the way, consider these Leave No Trace tips when you're planning your trip. And so it allows us to get that information out well in advance, again, of a person's trip before they get there, so they're able to plan. They arrive, and then on-site experience, they might see more specific Leave No Trace information about different activities in the area, different ecosystems that they might explore, trails that are available to them, and how they can care for and protect those places while they're experiencing them. We are going to be developing a toolkit. It is in the works for different stakeholders in Arizona, and this is just the ones that we've identified thus far. There probably there might be more that we add to these lists, but these are the key groups that we hope to work with in the state. And just some future thoughts about how important this partnership is and the importance of Leave No Trace. There are many, many people out there, more and more people coming, especially to the Western states, looking to explore the outdoors, and many people, but we're not making, very few new lands are being set aside for outdoor recreation. So it's so important that we maintain and preserve the integrity of the land that we have. Lots of times, and most of the time in our studies, people want to do the right thing. They're not out there out of malice. They just don't have the right information or the best information to protect the land while they're enjoying it. And that is our job, to get them that information. When we do, and we start changing that culture, it builds lifelong stewards for the land and people who want to come back, repeat visits to different places, and really this notion of caring for the outdoors. As I've said, knowing before you go, plan ahead and prepare is the most important part of this program. And just a final thought, it's really about, Leave No Trace is not about perfection. It's not about getting it perfect. It's about taking any kind of action. Any kind of action is the first step to really embracing this outdoor ethic. And finally, I just want to say that together, we really can create a new sustainability tourism paradigm, a model that combines Arizona's unique culture, incredible outdoor spaces, with Leave No Trace's effective programming for protecting these unbelievable natural resources that Arizona has. I look forward to working on this program and really building it out with all of you as partners. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have a little bit later in the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, that was fantastic. We are so excited to be working with you and your team to better care for Arizona's outdoors. AOT is also developing partnerships with local organizations, Keep Nature Wild, and Natural Restorations to amplify our Leave No Trace initiatives. To learn more about Leave No Trace and how you can be involved, please join their breakout session tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I want to give a quick reminder about Q&A. There's a button down at the bottom of your screen that you can enter a question for any of our presenters today. And as soon as we're done with Trevor Cartwright, we will all four be available to answer questions. So with that, I am really excited to talk about this next program of work. In the response to the pandemic, we restructured a planned 3-year AOT strategic plan and instead developed an Arizona Strategic Recovery Plan for tourism. We did this with our partners at the Coraggio Group. This plan is a priority for us, and it will enable us to help accelerate the recovery of travel and tourism across Arizona. I can assure you this is not a plan that's going to sit on the back of a shelf and not get used. This plan is going to guide our day-to-day work for this entire fiscal year. The good news is it complements our existing program of work, and it enhances what our agency does already with our partners in the industry. It's AOT-led, but industry-based. We are very excited about the initiatives that we created from this process, and we look forward to working with everyone to implement it over the course of the next fiscal year. I'm happy now to introduce Trevor Cartwright, founder and partner at the Coraggio Group, to share details. Trevor.
Okay, well, Debbie, thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be with you all today. I'm calling in from Portland, Oregon. I do wish I was on the ground with all of you, but we all know that that's probably not a good idea. And I'm so impressed that all of you are as committed as you are to your industry, that you're continuing on with this important conference in a virtual fashion. So good for you. I want to thank Debbie and her team at the Arizona Office of Tourism for the opportunity to be a part of this important project. You know, we work with states across the country, and we do strategic plans and change management and leadership and so forth. And I can tell you, in all the plans that we do for state tourism offices, we have never had a section in a plan called in the event of a pandemic. And yet here we are. And it's why we pressed the pause button on a typical strategic plan and really started to focus on stabilization and recovery for the industry. In many ways, we think about this plan as a bit of a triage. These are unprecedented times. You hear that term every day, and it probably gets a little old to hear, but it's really true. As we think about stabilization and recovery, it's going to require a different type of action. On behalf of the industry, on behalf of the Office of Tourism. It's going to require, you know, a different kind of partnership with one another. It's going to require a different kind of ownership on behalf of all of you across the industry on what recovery means. As Debbie said, this is industry-led. It'll be led by AOT, but it's based on industry insight. What I'd like to do is share a little bit with you on how we are sharing the plan. Right now, I believe over the last couple of days, the plan in its entirety, it's 45 pages, by the way, has been shared at tourism.az.gov. I'm just going to share a high-level overview of what the plan contains to kind of orient you so you have your bearings. But I hope that all of you will take time to go to tourism.az.gov to look through the entire plan. It's a good read and it's packed with great information. The other thing, I believe the Office of Tourism shared a link of the plan in their Tourism Tuesday e-newsletter. So there you'll find an executive summary. If you don't have time to dive into the 45 pages right now, the tourism e-newsletter that was sent out yesterday will give you a good feel at a high level, go a little bit deeper than we'll have the time to go through today. What I'd like to do is just share with you what I'll be touching on during my time with you. I'd like to share an overview of the planning process, the decision criteria that help to ground our work and shape our decisions, key priorities the plan is organized around, and then finally, the approach to how the plan will be managed during the planning horizon. First, I'll start with how we created the plan. From the very beginning, on day one, we knew that the plan couldn't be created in a vacuum. This had to be a plan about the industry, for the industry. And so we created an industry panel of 25 individuals, an advisory group, who participated in a series of listening sessions statewide. There were many different parts of the tourism industry that were represented through this industry group, including other state agencies, lodging partners, tribal communities, sports and tourism authority, food and beverage organizations, outdoor recreation, destination marketing organizations. A lot of different people came together and invested their time. Many of you are probably participating today virtually, and I want to thank you because your input is really what set the stage for how the plan was created. We created an industry planning team that was comprised of internal planning members. So there, I believe there were about 9 team members from the Office of Tourism. Different functions were represented. We also included external team members who participated in the process as well, from Visit Mesa and Phoenix Sky Harbor. And I want to thank you for being part of the planning team. Your contribution was so important. Mark and Debbie Osterreich, I want to thank you both. We also took a look at macroeconomic trends. As you know, this pandemic is nothing that is really in our control. We also know that Arizona is in the news, and I know all of you have this top of mind. But one of the first things that we had to do when we started the process was raise our heads up and start to look at, from a macroeconomic perspective, what are 3 scenarios that might play out? And we looked to guidance from Forbes, McKinsey, Harvard Business Review, and you've probably heard these economic models of V, U, and L. Let me tell you a little bit about those. We took a look at a V-shaped economy recovery, and that is a rapid decline followed by a rapid uptick in economic activity. We then looked at what we called a U-shape that has a steep economic decline followed by a long trough, and then hopefully followed by a fairly steep economic recovery. And then lastly, we looked at an L shape, or a kind of a long slog, if you will, a long recovery where there wouldn't be a vaccine for a few years. In the U shape, we thought there would be a vaccine in a 2021 timeframe. In the V shape, we thought there'd be a vaccine perhaps as early as this fall. We didn't think that was realistic, so we chose to lead with the U shape, or the steady and incremental scenario, as an overarching macroeconomic context to create the plan that we're going to lead with over the next 12 to 18 months. And that, by the way, is the time frame that this plan contemplates. And like any strategic plan, it's important to know that no plan is ever written in stone. You always have to have the good discipline of being willing to step back, examine the impacts that the plan is having against the intention that you set when you created the plan, and know when it's time to course correct. I'm going to talk in a few minutes about how that part of the planning process is going to happen once we get into talking a little bit about implementation. So again, we look broadly at three macroeconomic models. We chose the U-shape, or steady and incremental as we're calling it. And that's what we're planning on leading with as we begin implementing this plan right away. Next up, I'll talk about the decision criteria. Now, in your organization, you probably work with decision criteria as you go about the process of creating your own strategic plan. So you know that the value of decision criteria is really in setting the parameters for how to make good decisions, or the best decisions, based on the operating environment that you've identified. So in other words, what must the plan accomplish for us to all agree that it's a good plan and it's accomplishing the right things? So you're looking at the 5 decision criteria that the planning team identified. I'll run through them really quickly. First, over the next 12 months, we need to be confident that the plan is going to advance the mission of AOT and its commitment to ensuring tourism's role as a driver of Arizona's economy. Second, the stabilization and recovery plan must support public health guidelines, making the health and safety of our residents and our visitors equal priorities. Third, the plan needs to be both informed and supported by relevant data wherever possible. Fourth, the plan needs to emphasize actions that are scalable while at the same time balancing the unique conditions throughout the state. And that's one of the things that we learned through the advisory panel and all those listening sessions that we did in one of our first steps. We heard loudly and clearly the differences, the unique characteristics of the way each community in each area of the state is actually experiencing the impact of the pandemic. And the plan really needs to provide for some unique aspects in terms of actions that we'll take in this regard. And then lastly, the plan needs to honor responsible visitor principles and practices. And we heard a lot about those from our previous speaker with Leave No Trace. Next, I'd like to share a little bit about how we focused the plan, or what the plan is actually focusing on over these next 12 to 18 months. The first area that we're going to be focusing on of 3 is accelerating leisure travel activity throughout the state. So this is that scalable piece that I talked about earlier in the decision criteria. Accelerating leisure travel activity across the state. The second is more of a focus on urban centers. So stabilizing visitor volume in our urban centers of the state. And then lastly, we're going to reinvigorate and strengthen tourism in rural and tribal areas. So those are what we're calling the 3 key statewide priorities. Connected to each of these are a total of 12 strategic areas of focus. So under each one of these, accelerate leisure travel, stabilize visitor volume in urban centers, and reinvigorate and strengthen tourism in rural and tribal areas, there are a number of very specific strategic areas of focus, which you can find when you take a look at the plan in its whole, if you go to tourism.az.gov. But I'll give you a couple of examples just to kind of whet your appetite. Under accelerate leisure travel activity statewide, some of the areas of focus include provisions for food and beverage, outdoor recreation, accommodations, and luxury experiences. Some of the things we looked at focusing on under the stabilized visitor volume in urban centers, we're looking at resorts and hotels, attractions, sports, meetings, conventions, and business travel. For our reinvigorate, strengthen tourism in rural and tribal areas, we're looking at partnerships with tribal communities, traveler education, and with an emphasis on stewardship principles, balancing business and residential readiness to take on, if you will, an uptick in rural travel. We want to make sure that the residents feel okay about that. They're very important in this mix. So we've got action steps supporting that. Speaking of action steps, if you're wondering, the plan in its entirety includes 41 supporting actions that connect to the 12 areas of focus that are in service, if you will, to the 3 key statewide priorities. So you can see how this ladders down and how it ladders up. So this gives you an idea of how the plan is focused. the 3 areas of priority, 12 strategic areas of focus, and 41 supporting actions. And obviously, we'd be here a lot longer than we have time for if I went through each one of those. Next, I'd like to talk about managing the plan. As all or most of you know, if you're currently working on a strategic plan, or maybe you've had a strategic plan in the past, one of the biggest frustrations is, yeah, you know, we do all these work and then they just go on the shelf. So part of what we did in this planning process is we didn't just stop with, you know, creating the plan. We actually took it a step further and started talking about, well, how are we going to manage this plan over time? So I want to walk you through some of those steps or some of those conversations that we have, because they're important. The first is ongoing monitoring of the external leading indicators. And when you do look through the plan, you'll notice that we refer to those external leading indicators as windsocks. For those of you who are familiar with aviation, you know that windsocks are used often in small airports to give the pilots an idea of which direction the wind is growing on the ground. So which way should we take off and which direction should we land from? Windsocks are basically providing that windsock or that monitoring system for AOT to be able to look up and above, if you will, the traditional metrics that they're going to be looking at over time. So they'll continue to look at visitor volume. They'll continue to look at, you know, website traffic and all the things that you would have them typically looking at and reporting on. But if we did just that, and we weren't looking up above the horizon and looking at what the windsocks, those leading indicators, were telling us, we wouldn't have confidence that we're still working within the right scenario, the right macroeconomic environment that the pandemic is starting to bear out. So these windsocks are a monitoring system to tell us whether or not we should stick with the plan we have, or we need to shift or pivot to a different scenario. And we did some work on that, and there's a little bit more work on that yet to do after today. But it's important for you to know that we're looking up at windsocks, the external leading indicators, as well as down at our traditional metrics that we've looked at traditionally over time. The combination of both are critical. The second aspect I wanted to share about managing the plan is that it's designed to be dynamic and responsive to those changing conditions. As Debbie and her team report out on the metrics that you're used to, they'll also be giving guidance on things that the team believes might need to shift. The plan is going to be updated regularly if it makes sense. If we're not willing to be flexible, if anything, this is a plan. If somebody mentioned the other day that this is something where we all have to plan to be spontaneous. It's kind of counterintuitive because you think of a strategic plan and it's your direction, your blueprint. But you know as well as I do that especially now we have to be able to be agile, nimble, and responsive. And I can tell you that the team at AOT is nothing if not that, just based on what I've experienced with them and their ability to make shifts as needed in order to make sure that the program is relevant and they're serving all of your needs to the best that they can and the best of their ability. Next, monthly updates in Tourism Tuesday. So hopefully all of you subscribe to Tourism Tuesday. That's a great tool that's sent out every Tuesday. You're going to start to see new information in Tourism Tuesday that's going to start to talk about those windsocks, those leading economic indicators, as well as those traditional metrics that are reported on. So that's something that will be used as a communication vehicle where the Office of Tourism will give you kind of its perspective on, should we stay the course or do we need to shift some things or a lot of things? There's going to be a formal report on progress to all of you at next year's Governor's Conference. Hopefully we'll all be in person in 2021. There'll be a formal update there. In January, there will be a formal review with the advisory group. So that advisory group that we started working with through all those listening sessions that I talked about just a few minutes ago, we want to get the band back together, so to speak, and sit down and start to look at all the intended impacts of this stabilization and recovery plan and whether or not they're bearing, if you will, on the ground for these folks who are providing some advice, some real-time on-the-ground advice. So look for the potential of a formal update to the plan in a January timeframe. And then lastly, Deb mentioned this earlier in some of her opening comments. This plan is AOT led, but it's industry owned. And there's evidence of that, again, through this advisory group that we established, and just the high caliber of stakeholder and partner outreach and the connection the Office of Tourism has with all of you. While AOT will lead this, it's not AOT's sole responsibility to deliver the impact. They are going to need to partner with all of you at a different level than what maybe they've partnered with you in the past. In that sense, this is a collective impact. This is a collective ownership of the results of this stabilization and recovery for the tourism industry. This truly is, I think, part of what they meant when they said, we're all in this together. So that's the update that I have for you. And I know that there's going to be questions that Debbie is going to be taking in a moment. I'm going to stop my screen there and turn it back over to Debbie to take us off from here and do some question and answers here in a couple minutes. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Trevor. Thank you for walking beside our team at AOT and our industry through this time. We know it's a little crazy right now. I really want to thank all of our industry partners who continue to support the industry, our office, all of us together. We know that that's how we're going to get through this, is together. So Coraggio will have a breakout session tomorrow that's going to focus on how your community can get more engaged in this process and learn how to use these resources to create your own recovery plan. Now, while you're thinking of questions, because that's our next segment, we're going to give the governor's video a second shot here. So please join us in welcoming Governor Ducey.
Welcome to the first ever virtual Arizona Governor's Conference on Tourism. Even though we're meeting virtually today, I wanted to express my gratitude to each and every one of you for your support of the tourism industry during these unprecedented times. Tourism is a vital sector in our state's economy, and the Arizona Office of Tourism will continue to be essential in leading the recovery efforts going forward. I know this pandemic has required sacrifices of all of us. Please know I am deeply grateful for your partnership as we work to contain the spread of COVID-19 and ensure a healthy Arizona. Have a great conference, and I look forward to seeing you all in person next year.
All right, we're excited. That worked here. You should have heard the screams. So now what we are going to do with all 4 presentations ready, we've got a number of questions already, but if you have not submitted your question, please feel free to go to the button at the bottom. It's called Q&A. It's just a little tab down at the bottom. You can submit your question and they'll come through to me. I'm going to put each question out to a speaker so you'll be able to hear the question and their answer. And again, remember we're live, so it might take a second or two to transfer over to our speakers. So we're going to have all four of us up on screen. If we can do that. Look at that. Technology, I love it. Okay, so we are going to kick things off, and I'm going to go just looking at our questions here. So Colleen, the first question is for you. How can we get more information on the city and local level trends with the studies done by destination analysts?
So the study by destination analysts is really a national study. So we may not get quite a big enough sample to look at individual cities. One of the benefits of our choice to subscribe to the study is so we can get that Arizona data. So I don't know if that's possible, but they're a great research company. And so I always recommend reaching out to them to see if they have any more data that might be helpful for your particular area. And we can always connect you with them as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Colleen. Dana, I've got a question for you. Oh, can you speak a little bit more, Dana, about the strategies that you find most successful to engage travelers? Humor instead of shaming, what kind of things work best?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you brought up shaming because there has been a bit of a social media phenomena where that has taken place quite a bit. And what we find is that shaming doesn't work, and shaming only belittles people and makes them feel bad. And so it's something that we very much turn away from and try deliberately to not implement in any of our messaging. And encourage any of our partners to do the same. So when we look at reaching people, mild humor we have found does absolutely work. And any way to really engage people in a way that's interesting, that's user-friendly, that's relevant, and then most importantly, as I mentioned, that really gets into the why we want people to do certain things. And sometimes that can be super straightforward. Other times it can have nuances that are very specific to a different ecosystem, or maybe it's a specific trail that has something unique features about it. But the more we can know about a place and the more we can know about a different audience that we're trying to impact, that's when we can tailor our messaging to be most specific. But I'm glad you actually brought that shaming issue up, because it's definitely something that we do not recommend. There's so many ways to be effective in messaging that are much more user-friendly and effective.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Dana. Okay, there is a question here for me that I am going to try to answer, and it is, will we still host international journalists this year? And the answer is yes, if travel allows us to do that. Obviously, we know that when people can see Arizona and experience Arizona for themselves, they're much better off. And so I think from the standpoint of Arizona, we want them to see it so they can write about it and share it in a better way. But we also, as I've said multiple times, we want everybody to be able to do it safely. So we'll continue to keep you posted as we get to that point, and let's keep our fingers crossed that we can do that. Okay, let's see, we're getting questions added by the minute here. So Trevor, let's see here. Trevor, you mentioned that we're one of the first states to create a full recovery plan. Are there any states that you know of and can talk about that are also creating recovery plans, or have you seen any interesting trends that might help us on ours?
Sure. And we've talked about, and Dana alluded to it, the great partners over in Colorado. Kathy Ritter's team is doing some great work in this area as well. We're starting to do a little bit of work in a similar regard with Delaware. New Mexico is considering some things as well. So there's some people in your neighborhood and some people afar. My guess though, Deb and whoever may have asked this question, is that this is going to be the norm for a while. I really believe that for most organizations, certainly in the tourism industry, planning in 3 or 5 year cycles is just not going to happen for a while. I think closer in, it's all going to be about stabilization and recovery to create the platform for rebuilding once you're stabilized and you've got a basis for recovery to then rebuild from there. So I think this is going to disrupt the planning cycles for a few years, actually. And again, I think you're one of the first people through the gate on this.
That's helpful, Trevor. And in fact, someone asked me earlier today on a different meeting that we had, if we were planning to do a strategic plan next year. And I said, you know, a lot of it is dependent on where we're at, but I imagined that we'd probably do a second year of our recovery plan, that seemed more realistic.
I think I would trust your gut on that. I agree wholly.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, Colleen, I've got one more question for you here. Well, I'm gonna ask you two real quick, Colleen, because I think one is an easy answer. Can you share the name of the app for the data you mentioned? And hold on one second. And then the second question is, do online lodging marketplaces such as Airbnb pay TPT and bed tax, and are they required to have a license?
All right, so as far as required to have a license, I'm not positive, but they do remit lodging taxes. And the name of the app, so Dean Runyon has built an interactive dashboard built in Tableau. So it's basically the same information as our PDF report, but it's just a little more, it's way more fun to use, I think. So you find that it's the Arizona Travel Impacts Interactive Dashboard. So to get to it from our homepage on tourismaz.gov, you click on Research and Resources, then Economic Impact, and you're going to scroll all the way to the bottom, and there's a button that says the interactive dashboard. So we're not doing a mobile app anymore. The actual interactive dashboard is pretty mobile friendly, so if you do pull it up on a phone, it should look good. Did I answer everything?
Yep. Okay, we're going to unplug my, go ahead. Let's start. Can you guys still hear me? Okay, perfect. I'm going to unplug this then too. And I think I'll be able to hear you guys now too. We were having some audio issues where I couldn't hear you, so I didn't know when you were done. So there's a couple quick questions that I have been asked. First is, will you please tell us exactly where the strategic recovery plan is located on tourism.az.gov? And I'm looking at Kiva.
It will be under strategic plans after this session.
Okay, and so after this session, we're going to take that final plan and it will be posted in tourism.az.gov under strategic plans. And next, I think it's tomorrow, we are doing a Tourism Thursday special GCOT edition. And so we'll include links to our slides. Several people asked today about our slides. Yes, they will be available. We can link those in there. We'll have this report in there from the strategic plan. We have a Leave No Trace flyer that we'll put in there. And so we're just going to put kind of all of this wrap up in our Tourism Thursday, our special GCOT edition tomorrow. Another quick question is, AOT considering added foreign language or tools for foreign visitors into the Leave No Trace program? And I would say that yes, we will certainly look at translating not just words, but also things for different languages. That probably won't be a first part of our project, but that's something that we can do moving forward into our second year of the project. And I know here, I've got a lot of questions here, you guys, so I apologize. Dana, can you, I've got this question is actually both for Dana and Trevor. And Dana, I'll start with you. So can you share a little bit more about the information that will be discussed? And I know neither you or Trevor are doing the session, someone from your teams are, but about the breakout tomorrow and a little bit further details about what people can learn and how they can use that for their own community with Leave No Trace. And then Trevor, I'll go to you. Same kind of question for him. Okay, so Dana.
Sure. So my colleague Andrew Leary is doing the session tomorrow, and he's going to get into much more specifics on kind of the next steps with the partnership. And the biggest thing that we're really looking at is that messaging and the tailoring of the message, and how then we can create those principles that are very specific for Arizona. And then, so it's messaging and it's then how they can be applied and in what format. And just regarding translation, yes, I do believe we already have a lot of information that is translated into Spanish. So we're gonna want to look at that as one piece, but then just how we want to apply the very specific messaging that can work for those partner groups that are probably ready for that information right now. So that will be part of this toolkit, assembling this toolkit that, you know, the idea is that some pieces will be absolutely turnkey and ready to go, easy to move on right away, and then others might take some time. But Andrew's going to get into that in a lot more detail tomorrow.
Thank you, Deb, for the opportunity to share a little bit about tomorrow. My colleague, Matthew Landkammer, who is the head of our travel and tourism practice, is going to be leading the session. And it's going to be based on our recovery toolkit, which has 4 specific modules. And he's going to walk everyone through each of those modules. It's perfect for organizations, businesses that support the tourism industry or within the tourism industry who might not have the funding or the capacity to create their own strategic plan. Matthew is going to be going through how to activate, how to evaluate your current situation, your current state. Where am I now? How to prioritize based on where you think you need to go based on your current situation and where you're at. So how to go through a process of creating strategic priorities. He'll talk about how to activate those priorities and engage customers, consumers, stakeholders, partners in that process. And then lastly, because most, if not all of you are leaders in your organization, we know how hard it is right now to be a leader. Where do you go to get your energy? Where do you go to stay fresh and focused on what needs to be done? You're balancing a lot of things. So the last part of the modules, series of modules he'll be going through is leading. He'll also be talking about a program we're thinking about launching in Arizona for rural destinations and how they can do their own strategic planning. So it's going to be something I think that will be packed with a lot of great information, and you'll get a lot of value out of it.
Perfect. That's fantastic. Thank you guys both very much on that. So we've got several more questions, you guys. This is just fantastic. I really appreciate it. One of the questions was, will AOT have a Leave No Trace webpage at visitarizona.com? And the answer is yes. We are working right now with Dana's team to create kind of a theme, kind of the call already. We're looking at the same kind of thing for Arizona. I don't want to give away. We've got a couple little ideas that we're floating around here, but we're looking at hopefully an August 1st launch or shortly thereafter. And it'll have a dedicated page. We've already got some flyers right now that have been done just initially to help start, get this word out sooner. So yes, and as soon as that's available, we'll share it in Tourism Tuesday.
And Debbie,
I have a question for you. Do you think visitor profiles will change as a result of the pandemic?
I definitely think they will. One of the great things, I really have to give credit to our vendors. They have been nimble and flexible in this situation. And we get our profile data from Longwoods International, and they're already starting to deliver profile information quarterly instead of annually. So in about 4 months, we'll have a really good idea of how that visitor profile has changed and if it'll stay changed.
Yeah, none of us are going to be surprised with that. There will be changes. It's just what will it look like? And I think that's going to be important for everybody. Okay, let's see here. There are just so many questions. Debbie, I haven't even read this yet, so I apologize. Are you planning on targeting California and other nearby states to promote a nearcation? Oh, that's cute. I don't know whoever provided that, but I like that. A nearcation or getawaycations. Hey, you guys. Or is that strictly Arizona staycation? So yes, we are planning on doing that. We're looking at some short-term drive markets, about a 6-hour distance. Those states will likely include California, Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. Top of my head, we understand from the research that Colleen has provided and some of our great vendors, and everybody's saying the same thing. Not a lot of people want to get on a plane for vacation this year, but they do want to go on those drive trips. I don't know about you, my social media feed has been full of friends trips to our different neighboring states, and it's been fantastic to see. So we know those drive markets are really important. And as soon as we can, probably we'll have about a month with our in-state campaign, and then we'll launch that drive market campaign. And again, we'll let you know when that's live. Okay, I am going to go to, let's see here, Trevor, and I've got another one for Dana and then another one for Colleen. So Trevor, in your opinion, does Arizona have any strategic advantages that will be beneficial as we begin to recover?
Yes, your weather. Now I know it's probably 100 degrees down there today, but from the standpoint of a year-round opportunity for visitors, I think you're ideally situated from a climate standpoint. From your northern parts of the state, a little bit more cooler, if you will, but it's a great place to come, as you know, in the winter. I think from a year-round destination perspective, that's good. I think the challenge around recovery is as you start to welcome visitors from out of state, we really have to be mindful of resident sentiment. And so we're working very closely with the Office of Tourism around that piece of it to make sure that we're balancing concerns around resident sentiment with bringing people from out of state. Taking a look at those indicators, the windsocks, we're doing this, I know, where we're looking at trends in the pandemic and feeder markets. We're really wanting to make sure that we're balancing all of that as we open ourselves up for the opportunity for those drive markets. That's
perfect. Good. I like the yes answer, by the way. Dana, What do you think about leave no trace, including COVID messaging, such as social distancing, masks, etc.? And do you have any research that goes along with that?
Yeah, what I think we all are beginning to realize, or maybe this has been in front and center for a lot of people, is that COVID is probably not going away anytime in the near future. And it is something that we're learning to adapt to and we need to adapt to. And people, one of the things that we know from our research is that people not only got out during the pandemic in different ways, but now that some of these restrictions have lifted, there is a desire to get out like never before. So a lot of people are wanting to connect with the lands, and that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of reasons for that. So we know that there are some basic COVID type safety issues and leave no trace issues. So protecting people and protecting the land that we can suggest. And they're pretty straightforward. Masks, absolutely. Social distancing, absolutely. And going back to that being prepared. So just as kind of an example, a lot of people might show up at a place that now you must have a reservation for. So it's really important to know where you're going and know what some of the new restrictions there are because of the pandemic. Being prepared and bringing the things that you need that you may have bought in a place before, but these stores and other places might not offer those things or might even be closed. So there's a lot of good, solid information that is pandemic or COVID specific, but those are kind of the easiest ones. And we will work with Arizona, the Office of Tourism, to tweak those, to make them relevant, and to keep them, if we need to, front and center for people who, again, want to get outside during this time.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Colleen, quick question. Can we get zip code TPT tax information? Do we have that, or do you know if the Department of Revenue has that?
We don't collect that. I'm not sure about Department of Revenue. I do know, though, that depending on what kind of information you're looking for, if there's fewer than a certain threshold of businesses that report for privacy issues and confidentiality issues, they won't give you that. So who does do a really good job of collecting TPT tax information is Northern Arizona University. So if you look at their, I think it's under their College of Business, they have taxes listed out by county, which is really helpful.
That's really helpful. Thank you. We had a question about where people can find the Leave No Trace flyers. They are at tourism.az.gov. Is it / Leave No Trace // see / Leave No Trace. So we do have them there, trying to make it easy for you to find. If you can't find it, please let me know in the Q&A box. Let's see, we've talked about that. I've got, oh, Colleen, one more for you really quick, and then I've got one more for Dana and one more for Trevor, and then we'll wrap it up. So Colleen, real quick, any information about the economic impact study from Mexico that you might be able to share with the audience?
Yes. So I didn't touch too much on international, given what we're looking for in the near future, but we did. So we did do our, initially it was supposed to be a year-long study, actually interviewing people at all the ports of entry. We did stop the study a couple months early because it just didn't feel safe to keep our survey takers out there any longer. But we do have results, and I can say that Mexican visitors to Arizona contribute a total economic impact of $3.5 billion into Arizona's economy every year, or at least in 2019. And so we're working right now on creating sheets that will give you a breakdown of the actual impact by port of entry, so you can get some more detailed information. So we're fine-tuning those. But yes, you will be hearing much more about our Mexico study in the near future.
Thank you for that sneak peek. We appreciate it. Okay, again, one more for Trevor and one more for Dana. Trevor, can the local DMOs adapt the AOT recovery plan, or would you recommend each destination create their own? And before you answer that, I've been trying to talk to staff and hear different questions. But this program is also going to be part of our rural marketing co-op program. We've worked with Coraggio Group, and there's going to be a way to kind of create your own plan that works in conjunction with ours. So, but Trevor can answer it a lot better than I can, but I do want our partners to know that it is part of the rural co-op program.
Thank you for the question. There are several action steps in the recovery plan that specifically call out different ways of partnering with DMOs across the state. So I think if you are a DMO, you're going to see lots of requests from the Office of Tourism to partner on different kinds of things. I think you still need your own plan. I would love it selfishly if you would use the plan, the stabilization and recovery plan that we're talking about, as an overarching context that might inform at least some of your initiatives so that there is continuity. I think this crazy time we're in right now requires the states and the local DMOs to work together in a different way than they have in the past. I know it's always been synergistic, but this is synergistic, you know, with a 10x rider on it. So I know that there's going to be lots of outreach from the office to all of you in the weeks and months ahead for ideas on ways to partner. But again, you need your own plan. There does need to be some connection, I think, to the overarching efforts that the state is doing, though.
Thanks, Trevor. And the one thing that I want to mention, we haven't even shared this a lot yet, but I think it's really important because there was kind of a question that was similar to what you just answered, but it was really about rural. We have internal teams, what Trevor calls tiger teams, which are really great terminology for us, but we have a rural and tribal team and an urban team. And so we're going to be focusing on those different markets because they are a little bit different and they have unique needs. And so our internal team will be working with our partners in each of those areas in the coming weeks and months ahead. So look forward to that too. And last question, Dana, is for you. With many of the rest stops closed and state highways collecting more debris from travelers, are there discussions about how Leave No Trace can work more with the highway systems in the various partner states?
That's a great question. And yes, absolutely, there are discussions. We do not have any formal partnerships, but it just brings up another huge opportunity for us together, the Tourism Office and Leave No Trace, to bring those types of partnerships on board. It's a little bit of it would just be a unique partnership for us, again, because we haven't reached out to that type of group. But to me, just looking at the dynamics of how we could reach people and the impact that we could make in that way, it absolutely makes sense. So I would look forward to those conversations. And just one more thing I would mention about the session tomorrow, we are looking at the different partnership structure and how different groups can really get involved. So I encourage anyone who's really interested to really participate that, and you'll get more specifics there.
And as a reminder, you don't have to pick between either of these two great breakouts. We have 4 fantastic breakouts tomorrow. They are all going to be recorded. So if you hit one, you can always go back and watch the other 3. So don't feel like you're going to miss out on one of them. We are going to record them. We knew with this virtual format, it was going to be hard to get to all of the breakouts that you wanted in this short time. So thank you all for doing that. Special thanks to our presenters. We're not quite wrapping up, but we are wrapping up with our presenters. Thank you all very much. We appreciate your time, your commitment. We're excited about these programs we have ahead. So really quick for our attendees, before we close, I want to let everyone know that after a great deal of debate and discussion, we have decided not to hold our awards this year. It really became clear over the last couple of days with our rehearsals that we couldn't honor the awardees the way they deserve to be honored. And so what we will do is next year at our in-person GCOT, fingers crossed, we will be honoring not only our winners from 2021, but also our winners from 2020. So please make sure you join us for that. And finally, in closing, as you can see from our record-breaking 2019, the foundation is here for tourism in Arizona. It's going to take work, collaboration, and time. We know that we're all going to need to be flexible, sometimes even spontaneous, but what I love is that we know that we're going to move forward, and we're going to do it in a way that tourism always does, and that's together. So thank you all for all that you do. Thank you for being here with us today. We start tomorrow our breakout sessions at 9 a.m. We have a really dynamic speaker, Chris Fields, at 10:15, and he's going to inspire us on how to accept change into our world right now and use it for the better. So thank you all very much. We'll see you tomorrow.